Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. We are so excited to be here today. We're just going to give a minute for everybody to get into the webinar, and then we will get started. If you'd like to tell us where you're coming from, please add it in the chat. We'd love to see where you are logging in from today. Wonderful. I see we've got people from all over joining us. All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Upswing's first online webinar of 2024. We are so excited to have everyone here today for Upholding Diversity and Inclusion in Higher Ed, a discussion with Upswing partners. My name is Elena Carroll, and I am the VP of Marketing and Corporate Development at Upswing. And we have such an amazing group of panelists here today, as well as Upswing CEO Melvin Hines. So if we can go to the next slide, and before we get started, I do want to just go over a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. So first and foremost, we wanted to recognize that today's topic is definitely a sensitive one. And we just kindly ask that everyone here today be professional and courteous to everyone else in the room. We're really looking forward to the discussion and know that it's going to be very beneficial for everyone here. If you do have questions for our panelists today, we'd like you to submit them in the Q&A, and we will make sure to get that to them through the discussion. This webinar is also going to be recorded, as you may already notice. So we will send out the recording as well as free professional development certificates to everyone that has attended. So I'm going to hand it over now to Melvin Hines, Upswing CEO, for him to kick us off.
All right, thanks so much, Elena. And welcome everyone. I'm really excited about the conversation that we're having today. In particular because, it really harkens back to why I started Upswing in the first place. My name's Melvin Hines. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Upswing. And when so I'm originally from, as this quote here says, from South Georgia. And so when I originally came to college myself, being kind of one of the first in my family and going through a lot of those experiences, I know that, it was a big challenge to me. There were a lot of things I didn't know. There were a lot of just struggles that I had in my first year that I really didn't want to share with other people. I knew that the resources were available on campus, but I kind of struggled with the idea of letting it be known that I was one of the people that was struggling. And I started to, notice that there was this center that was on campus that would be a place that people could kind of go to. And, it was, should I go? Should I, I don't know if I will go today. And one day I finally just kind of decided to go in, and it ended up being the campus multicultural center where there were different people who were also kind of in that same boat that I was. There was a place for people that were underrepresented minorities. There were places for people who were veterans. There were places for people who had disabilities. And it really kind of gave us an opportunity to talk about how, we could navigate through some of those self-esteem pieces and things like that that really kind of helped me at least be able to feel like I could succeed throughout that first year. And after that first year, I was flying, so that's something that really stuck with me. And it's actually a big part of why I created Upswing in the first place. So looking back on that experience, really what I wanted to do was have not just a platform, but an engagement tool that would create this sense of support for non-traditional students, for online students, to really kind of give them that same type of experience where no matter where they are, anywhere in the country, they could reach out to our virtual assistant and get the help that they're looking for. They could connect in through our platform and find a live support tool that they could feel like they had that same sense of belonging that I felt when I was on campus in the early 2000s. And so that's a big part of why I'm so excited about today's conversation here, because it's really about how do we make sure that we're continuing to create that same type of experience for students all across this country. Um, where I wanted to start with before I jumped into meeting today's panelists are that first kind of wanting to kind of level set on what we want to do with today's conversation. The idea behind today's conversation isn't that we want to talk about the merits or demerits of any particular piece of legislation or anything of that frame. Instead, what we want to focus on, and what I'd certainly love to hear from our panelists, is a little bit more about how they have on their campuses continue to focus on supporting those students who need that support the most, even as tides tend to change and shift, and as they're having to deal with being under-resourced and over asked to do things and all those types of things. And so I'm really excited to have these four participants here today. Um, we have today in our panel Dr. Sherelle Hobson. She is the Director of Experiential Learning and Enrollment Completion at Texas State University. Thank you so much. Really excited to have you here, Dr. Sherelle.
Thank you. Texas Southern University. They want to know me. But thank you for having me. It is definitely an honor to be here. So thank you again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep, Texas Southern University. Not Texas State. Apologize for that. Um, and then we also have Daryl Hilton here as well, who is the Director of Special Programs at the University of District of Columbia. At the University of District of Columbia. Really great to have you here again, Daryl. Good to see you.
Awesome. Good to see you and be here in community with everyone. Excited to engage in conversation today.
Awesome, awesome. And then we also have Christine Wilkinson, the Director of the Center for Retention Services at Bethune-Cookman University. Good to have you here, Christine.
Thank you so much. I look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you. And then last but not least, we have Lakeisha Jenkins-Washington, who is the Director of Retention and Academic Success at Central State University. Welcome,
All
Lakeisha.
right. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today and can't wait to dive into this conversation.
Same here, same here. So we'll go ahead and jump in and just start off with a couple of things that have taken place over the course of the last few years, just to kind of level set for everyone, the audience, our panelists. The first, multicultural centers and support services began appearing on campuses around the United States in around the 1960s. Around that time period, we started seeing really big growth and enrollment amongst many different types of minority groups from basically 1980 all the way to 2021. In the couple of years after George Floyd's death, what we started noticing was that there was a larger investment in these types of programs and initiatives that were taking place on campus, to the tune of, from what I saw, about $20 million that had been invested in those different initiatives. But since those 2 years, originally from 2020 to 2022, what we started noticing is a bit of a pullback, particularly with regards to different types of bills and legislation that have been taking place across different states. And that's kind of where we are now, which is trying to get a better understanding of how colleges are effectively navigating some of these challenges that are taking place to be able to better support those students that we know are needing help, that are, looking for some of those support tools and support resources that are there. And that's a big part of the reason why we wanted to have this conversation here today. So I'll start by just asking, I'll begin with Daryl here. Can you just introduce yourself and some of the things that you do at your campus at University of DC?
Yes, absolutely. So, good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Dr. Daryl Hilton, Director of Special Programs at the University of the District of Columbia in Northwest Washington, D.C. We are the nation's second HBCU founded in the nation, which is something that is a point of pride for our institution. Here at the institution, I oversee a number of different areas to include new student experiences, which has our first year experience, transfer student experience, new student orientation. I oversee a scholarship program, academic coaching, supplemental instruction, and tutoring, all under my leadership. Now, I don't do it alone. I do have a phenomenal team of staff who work alongside me to execute this work. So that is the main focus there. And in addition to that, which you'll hear me talk a little bit more about as we navigate the conversation, I am also the co founder and CEO of a nonprofit organization, the Collegiate Black Male Network, where our mission is to help increase the persistence and graduation rates of collegiate Black men. And we're in the process of chartering the final stages of chartering a chapter of the organization at the University of DC, which will be our inaugural chapter. So
Wow.
excited about that work as well and the things to come from that. So that's a little bit about me.
Great, great. Thanks for that introduction. That sounds really exciting there. I'll kick it on over to Dr. Sherrill. Can you just share with us a little bit about some of your work and the things that you're doing over at Texas Southern?
Absolutely. So I am Dr. Sherrill Hobson. I am at Texas Southern University. I'm the Director of Experiential Learning Enrollment Completion. And so as my partner here has mentioned, he has various roles and responsibilities that he has on his campus. So it's the same for me. I'm over tutorial services, over first year experience, over testing, so TSI testing, and some other various responsibilities that I have. But in this role, I've definitely had an opportunity to really work directly with the students. Also, have a phenomenal team as well, that we all hands on deck. And so we are really big on customer service and making sure that we serve our students. And so that is the space that we're in right now. And so we're just very grateful to have this opportunity to share some of the great things that we are doing at Texas Southern University to serve our students. And like you were saying, with all the different things that we have going on, we've been able to still move the needle and make sure that we are making an impact to our students on our campus.
That's really great. And I appreciate you being able to take the conversation and help us to be able to share a little bit more of how other college campuses can do the same for their students as well. Ms. Wilkinson, so I see I see that you actually have the banner behind you there. Do you want to share a little bit about what you're doing on your campus?
Absolutely. So I'm the director of the Center for Attention Services. So our work is with those students who've gotten themselves into some kind of academic jeopardy, working with them through a variety of referral services on campus, and helping them navigate their way back to a good standing. I always tell my students, my goal is at the end of the semester, you don't have to come see me again. You want to come and see me again. It's a big difference. We are part of a larger unit, which is the Office of Student Success and Retention Services. So we house in our unit, the tutoring center lives with me in my unit. The larger unit houses student success coaches. They advise and coach our freshman and sophomore students. Career Success is also housed in our unit, as is orientation. So we get to really see our students from beginning to end really all the way through. And we watch and we get to see year over year how things change.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. And I like that statement that you mentioned, that after that first time you want them to want to come back, not have to come back. And that really talks a lot about that customer support, that is really needed, specifically among students who are kind of right there at that cusp. So really happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
And then last but not least, we have Lakeisha Washington from Central State.
Hello, everyone. I am Lakeisha Jenkins Washington from Central State University. I might add that we are the only HBCU publicly in the state of Ohio. So it's just a pleasure to be here. And some of the things that I'm responsible for I am the executive director for the Undergraduate Student Success Center that also encompasses the director of retention and academic success. So I am responsible for advising for all incoming freshmen and just freshmen in general. I have a phenomenal team of student success coaches who are just amazing. They not only advise our students, but they also coach them as it relates to their majors. I'm also responsible for OASIS. This is the tutoring and supplemental instruction. Supplemental instruction here is relatively new. I brought it with me. And so, what I will say with that is it's very, very interesting to see how students are able to take on that service and actually learn more in that smaller type of setting than perhaps they would in their just course room, regular course room, if you will. The other part that I'm responsible for is it's first year experience slash retention. So I don't have to tell you guys that this is a formula for retention. And
Absolutely.
so all together, we're just making sure that students have their ability to flex their academic muscles, if you will. We do also offer US 1000 course for all of our incoming freshmen and a US 1200 course. I heard my colleague here make mention about students who are in academic jeopardy. So that's what that 1200 course is geared towards. It's not necessarily a course per se, but it's a skills enhancer.
Mm.
So those are some of the types of things that we're doing here at Central. And I always just say that my motto is if we build it, they will come. But if we include them, they will stay.
I really love that statement. I actually saw that on your profile before, and Elena and I were talking about we have to make sure to incorporate that in some of the things that we're doing as well. I really love that. Um, I'll actually stick with you just for our first question here. So you're talking a lot about just some of the ways in which you're trying to help to ensure that students are improving their student success on campus. How would you say that Central's also approaching diversity and inclusion as a context for supporting that student success as well?
So what I will say is, I believe that we are beginning to take a better look at just faculty and staff representation, because the truth of the matter is, students relate to other students, of course,
Hmm.
peer to peer. But it's something about when you change the whole approach and dynamic. Now you're able, the same way that you can relate to your peers, you can now relate to your faculty and staff members because they
Mm.
serve as the role models in the back and all of the backgrounds of some of the students, if you
Absolutely.
will. So what we have done is just looked at faculty, staff, campus climate, and our student support services. Now, the truth is, I don't want to be bold in this statement, but I also I just want to state the facts. Students will come to those who they feel comfortable with. Students will engage with faculty members and staff that engage with them. Now, we're not necessarily talking necessarily about the age difference of any sort. We're just talking about the overall care of
Hmm.
just students in general and their well-being. So what we began to do is take a look at our policies, what we offer, and begin to look at them quite differently. Instead of programming for students, we program now through students, and
Hmm.
we make them a part of our advisory boards. And we've
Interesting.
also started to include students, believe it or not, on some of our leadership and cabinet conversations
Oh,
because
wow.
their opinions matter.
Wow.
one particularly I want to add to is we have a strategic retention task force. And so we have 2 students that are a part of that task force. So you can just imagine the types of conversations that we're having with those students, giving us feedback as the
Yeah,
good, the bad, and the indifferent.
Yeah.
that's really interesting. I'm wondering if, if it's something that you could share. Were there any surprises that you've heard from that student retention task force that maybe was a blind spot?
Um,
And if
yes,
not, that's
I want to,
Pressure.
I want to play nice in the sandbox. But one of the things that surprised me the most is that some of the students felt like faculty was not engaging with them in a fashion that was comfortable, that
Hmm,
gave them the academic confidence they needed to persist. And so when I heard that, I found that very striking, if you will.
hmm, hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Dr. Shrell, I think you were getting ready to jump in as well. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts there.
Yeah, I would also agree with Ms. Washington. I think that it's important. I have this belief that no one speaks better about student success but students, right? And so you have
Yeah,
to hear from your students and find out what exactly do they need. And we always say that you have to meet them where they're at, but as mentioned, but Ms. Washington was saying, it's up to you to create this safe space for them, right? And so I came from an athletic background, so I'm always talking about winning and students understanding, winning in their own space and what that really means for them. And once you're able to create that culture of understanding, of respect, of love, even though it sounds simple, I think those are the things that students really need, right? I get students all the time in my office and I have to remind them I'm not your advisor, but they find a safe space because once they get someone that cares, is going to take the time to not only care about or speak about their academics, but their well-being, right?
yeah,
Being at HBCU, a lot of our students, of course, like any student, but in particular, our students, they already have a lot of challenges and barriers, right? And so our
totally.
job is to, how can I eliminate those barriers from you? And how can I create this space that you can see yourself being successful? Because it's one thing for us to see them and see their potential, but it's another for them to understand their potential and their success. And so one thing that I'm very big in my office, whether it's through advising or with my student workers that work at the front desk, is creating customer service. And some may say customer service, but this is ultimately the students are paying money to be there, and nobody wants to spend their money anywhere that
That's
they're
right.
not feeling loved and wanted. And so that is one of the biggest things for us, is making sure that the students feel safe, that they feel comfortable with coming into our space. When we think about tutorial services in our culture, again, being very prideful at times, that maybe we don't want to ask for help. So we're like,
Yeah,
either I'm good and I'll fake it till I make it. We still say that,
exactly.
or we just say this is too hard for me, and then we don't ask for the help, and then now ultimately we have a bill but no degree. And so I just think it's important that we create that space where students feel comfortable with saying, hey, I need help, or I need to talk, or I need something. So really making sure they understand that they're not just a number, but that they are the reason why we're here, the reason why we're serving, and creating that space for them so they can take ownership of their academics. So I would definitely agree with Ms. Washington. It goes beyond just, being present. What else are we doing for our students, and what environment are we creating for them?
Absolutely, absolutely. I really love what you were saying there because when I was when I actually taught for a few years at North Carolina Central University, and I was there at a time when I was a lot closer in age to the students, so I think that as a result they were students who felt like they could ask even more questions perhaps than maybe with other people, and they would come up to me after class and ask questions like, how did you decide what it was that you were ultimately wanting to do? Where do I go to think about if this is the career that I want to choose?
Yeah.
Which was pretty interesting because at that point in time, I was still trying to figure myself out. But
Yes.
I could at least tell them, hey, this is what I navigated towards to kind of get through that process. And it
Yeah.
was that experience that really kind of, helped me to recognize that, hey, if we could do this for more and more students, we can actually give them a vision, not just
Yeah.
a degree, but a vision for where that degree could take them. And so, absolutely agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to really kind of talk a little bit about how we've seen this shift take place over the course of the last few years. And for that question, I'll kick it on over to Christine. So we've seen this bit of a pendulum shift, if you will, where right after many of the events of 2020, we first saw a huge investment, as I mentioned earlier, about $20 million or so kind of being invested and trying to make sure that we are creating more of those safe spaces, more of those opportunities. But now we're kind of seeing, that kind of pendulum shift backwards now. And as someone who's working, and trying to support students kind of throughout some of these changes that you're seeing, you have seen, you probably will see in the future. I just would love to hear you kind of share what are some of the initiatives, activities, what are some of the things that you felt that you've been able to kind of do to kind of keep a steady shift despite what might be, kind of occurring outside of the campus walls?
So definitely growing a team that understands customer service at its very basic core, and being able to support our students in a way that goes past that swinging pendulum. We are in Florida. We're a private university. We are in Florida, however. And so we definitely are seeing some very strong shifts away from DEI anything. And so a lot of it's just us working with our students as human beings and what they need. We have initiatives in expanding our programs by student population, be it a transfer student or international students, student athletes, or whatever that organization is, expanding that to make sure there is inclusion without calling it inclusion, because you can make people feel included without having to put a title on what you're doing. So it's the act of it more than it is saying, check, here's a checkbox, we this, checkbox that. And we have to navigate that in relation to the state law. And so we've had to refocus how we do that. And then it's just a variety of different ways, but I really think the biggest thing we've done in our area is really just build the customer service to a point so students always feel that this is the safe space. We always tell our students, no matter where you are or where you're at, if you don't feel safe, you come here and you'll always be safe. We may have to call outside offices, but you can walk in this door and you're safe in this building, no matter who you are, where you are, what you are, any of those.
Absolutely.
And then as an institution, we're really guided by our founders' missions and beliefs. And in her last will and testament, the first thing she leaves is she leaves us love. And that's really important to the employees and the staff, that we love our students, So that's really where we see how we see that pendulum going back and forth. Really just holding steadfast to our founders' guiding principles.
I like that. That idea of holding steadfast to what your mission is, we visited a campus last year as an organization, and I know that one of the things that they were talking about was how it can become a challenge to be all things with few dollars and limited
I
resources and
think we'll all nod at that.
um how have you been able to make sure that you're supporting the like those different initiatives without yourself being burnt out, without you feeling like it's always just a tidal wave of need on coming through your doors?
You know, from a personal perspective, it's managing time, making sure that I pour into myself on my off hours so that I can pour into my students and my employees when I'm here.
Mm,
And it sounds cliche, but I really think that if you come in every day ready to support and help, that you can do that. But for me, it's time management skills. Um, you know, and asking for help because
yeah.
I can't do everything. And so what I have found is that cross-departmental works as well as
Mm,
just the people here in our unit.
gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely really key and really important.
Yeah.
Um, Daryl, I'd love to hear how you're also navigating that at University of DC. And I'll add on to that as well. If you've been noticing or hearing anything from, your students as you're supporting them as well, just about, concerns or whether or not they feel like they're able to still get that help and support.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting being in the nation's capital, right? There's always going to be the political climate that comes with any and everything that we do, right? And then being a quasi government agency, because we
Hmm.
are similar to Central State being the only public in the state of Ohio, we're the only public institution in the nation's capital. Um,
Mm,
so there's always going to be a political climate or a political undertone. However, I think being an HBCU that's positioned in the nation's capital, that was strictly founded and is committed to serving the community, um, I personally have not seen too much concern from students holistically, um, as it relates to them still being able to get support despite the negative opinions as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, does that mean that we are perfect? No, we're definitely not perfect, and we still have some ways to go, but we are not. Like in the state of Florida, with or the other states where legislation has been passed, really kind of banning some of these DEI efforts, we have not really experienced that from my lens, I should say. But in that case, though, it's like because of some of these impacts, we are now going to be seeing possibly an influx of our Black and Brown students that will be coming to our institutions. And so, how
Mhm.
do we as an institution prepare for that influx? How
mm,
do we prepare to continue to support them, even though we may not have the human capital, we may not have the financial capital to be able to support them. And so a lot of times when I facilitate in different spaces, it's really easy for us as institutions of higher learning or staff members, administrators to challenge ourselves to think outside the box, right? What can we do differently? Think outside the box to get other resources and things of that nature. But
mm,
in my opinion, sometimes that's not needed. Sometimes we just have to think inside the box, right? We already have what we need to support students. We already have the things, kind of going back to what Ms. Washington said, if you build it, they'll come. If you include them, they will stay. We already have the things that brought them to the institution. So how can we
mm,
utilize what we have to really capitalize on the experience as best we can to keep them there? Now, that does not mean that we cannot go out and get additional resources, et cetera, and advocate for additional resources. But what I want to the point I want to drive home is to say for everyone listening is don't forget the things that you already have, because we are so much in the space of advocating for what we want. And so that's kind of how we kind of navigate that, or how I navigate with my team here at UDC.
Mm.
is really thinking inside the box, because at the end of the day, we can't change the things that we can't change in this moment. So how do we still make it work, and how do we still make sure that we're providing the best possible experience for our students? Because UDC is very unique. The average age of our student is 30 years old. We are a commuter student, and we offer programming from workforce development credentials to associate degrees, master's degrees, doctoral degrees, and we even have a law school. So our institution can
Wow.
literally provide the full scope of work for individuals in the communities that we serve, and so we still have to support them um, the best that we can. So how do we make sure that we
Yeah.
do that, even with limited resources, even with the political undertones and climates?
I like that. I really like that idea of thinking about what can we do with the resources that we currently have in front of us as we're continuing to advocate. Um, I'll pause for a second to just say if anyone in the audience has any questions for our panelists today, feel free to certainly share those. We'd love to include you in this conversation as well. But jumping back into that, uh, Daryl, what are some of the can you give us an example of some of the specifics that, you've seen where, perhaps you began to recognize that, "Oh, well, here is an example of a way in which we can support our
Mhm.
students, by thinking more in the box there."
Absolutely. So we have our academic coaching program, which is under my leadership, and the way that academic coaching worked previously, it traditionally worked with students who were identified as being on academic probation, so less than a 2.0 GPA. However, I went to my supervisor at the time and I told her, I said, "Hey, I think that's a very reactive model, and I personally just do not like
Mm,
it." Because essentially, what we're saying with academic coaching is that, hey, we have all these resources, but we're not going to help you until after you're failing. And I
uh,
said, and if we're a data-driven institution, if higher ed is, we love the data, right? The data tells the story, and we make data-informed decisions. So if we are these data-driven institutions, why are we not using data in a proactive measure to identify students who are most at risk coming into the institution and providing academic coaching services to prevent them from getting on probation to begin with? And so I was able to switch that model and switch the approach of academic coaching for the most at-risk population coming into the institution. And it was a Hail Mary. Don't get it twisted, y'all. It was very much a Hail Mary that I threw. And I said, I hope that it works. But I'm able to share that in one semester of this differentiated approach, we were able to increase the cumulative grade point average of the cohort by 0.16 as compared to the previous cohort. And we were actually able to
oh,
decrease
wow.
the number of students on academic probation by 13% in one semester. So
Wow, that
that
is
goes to show,
impressive.
yeah. So I threw the Hail Mary and it worked. So I'm like, okay, let's figure out how we can elevate it
Yeah.
and increase it, and really to expand it to be more intentional with other at-risk populations or other other marginalized communities or individuals who may need some additional support. But again, it's about saying, if we are here to support them and we are these data driven institutions, let's utilize the data that we all have
Mhm.
to identify and inform how we can approach it from a proactive measure versus providing the resources when they're already one foot out the door, when they're already discouraged because they had a bad semester, when they don't know what to do, right? Or kind of similar to Melvin in your story, I know I needed help. I knew there was resources, but I didn't know how to access it, right?
Mhm.
So instead of giving it to them or trying to give it to them after they're already failing and not checking emails and not responding to the text messages and things of that nature, let's get
Yeah.
them while they're most excited, when they're coming into FYE, when they're coming into new student orientation. Give them a space to say, here are the resources that we have, and not only here are the resources, but let's go ahead and log in so you're already set up. Let's go ahead and log you in the Upswing and show you how to
Absolutely.
navigate it, so that way when you need it, you already know that it's there and you know how to utilize it, versus feeling defeated or feeling embarrassed to ask, how do I approach this work? How do I approach and ask
Absolutely.
for help? Because we've already dispelled the myth up front and say everybody's going to use it, not just those who need help, and breaking down those barriers in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had to stop myself from saying amen just a second ago because I absolutely agree with what you're saying there. And I really like the idea of just kind of peeling back that onion a little bit and saying, how can we use those resources to support greater swaths of students so that they're thinking about it on that proactive side and less on that reactive side. We tend to say a lot of times internally about, wanting to be move from being firefighters to being fire preventers. So absolutely agree with that. There were a couple questions. I want to the first question is from Julia. What are the key points to make students feel more comfortable with us or in general with the school staff? And I wanted to pose that question to Ms. Washington because I know that you mentioned earlier that that was one of the key tenets that you try to make sure to support with your students. I'd love to hear just a little bit about some of the ways in which you're able to make students feel like this is an open environment for them to come into.
I appreciate that question a lot. I guess for me, it comes with just a will. Do you have a will to want to see your students succeed? And if the answer is yes, then we got empathy already because you care about the student. Now, when you're saying you care, you can't just say you care, you have to show the student that you care. The conference hours that we say that we have, we got to keep them because if you don't, then that's the difference in a handful of students being on the borderline of either being retained or not. That one conversation during your conference hours make a difference. Another thing that I can say, and I do teach a student seminar class, but I teach it online. I always have dialogue with them and I encourage them. Even though they're online, I sent a announcement on D2L and say, hey, remember these things. This particular quiz is coming up. We have this particular grading, first interim grades are due on this particular day. Please ensure that you have taken care of all of your academic business, because if not, then you will likely suffer and have a deficient grade. So what I will say is the very same care that you have for your colleagues and their opinions about how you teach or not teach, the students are the customers. And are they always right? They are not. But we still have to have a spirit to serve. So when you serve your students, you're doing all that you possibly can to ensure their academic success, that they're on a journey to success. Now, will students take advantage of you in this process? Of course they will. Of course they will. But again, you're not responsible for what they do. You're responsible for what you do to help them.
Absolutely.
So again, if I'm telling you, the base is a will to want to serve. And in that particular stance, those students will find confidence in you. They will come to you. They will be encouraged. You will say one thing and they will be there to graduate in 4 years, not 6 or 8. Again, although we know that some students, it takes them a little bit longer, and that's okay. But what encouraging word can you give them? What pat on the back on a particular day can you give to them that's going to be the difference in graduating in 4 years, 6 or 8?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Dr. Cheryl, it sounded like you were wanting to kind of add on to that as well.
Oh, yes. I was just going to say, just piggybacking off of Ms. Washington, when she talked about just the will. And, I'm the founder of the Win with Why Foundation as well. And what I found to be very important, and why I developed the Win with Why model, was because there is a will, but there's a why, and everyone has that why. Students have that why. We have that why while we're doing the things that we're doing. And I think it's important to be very transparent with your students. We've all been in some sort of storm, but not in the same boat, right? And so I think that we can really hurt our students when it's like, well, if I made it, you can make it. If I do it, you can do it. Well, everyone may not have that willpower. Maybe everyone may not have that strength or the resources. And so I think it's important to still be sensitive to what they need, but also give them the spirit of winning and that will, and understanding their why, whether they're there for their family or whether they're there to get a degree to, get out of a certain situation. And for some students, they may not be there for either one of those things, right? And so it's just important to find out, what do I need to do to meet you where you're at so that you can be successful in what you're doing? Like I tell students all the time, this is a return on your investment. You're paying money, you're going to have to pay back this loan with or without a degree. So you might as well get something out of it. And so I just think it's important that, your staff understands their why, because we do have a time, especially HBCU. I know we balance a lot of roles. You have a title, but you have 1,000 other responsibilities, right? And so that's just what it takes, because of money and funding and staff and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's important, like was it Miss Christine? I think you were saying find that balance. I'm still working on that, finding that I'm still finding that balance, trying to find that balance. But I think what continues to drive me and the department is just really understanding when it's time to tap into that why, and making sure that the students don't feel the shifting, right? I know like back in the day, I know my parents used to tell us, stay out of grown folks' business. And so I think it's important for our students as well, for them to know what's going on, but them not to feel the shift, letting them know that, hey, there is a shift, but you're good. We're all right. We're going to make it. And so I think that's also important. So I want to just thank Ms. Washington for just talking about that will, because there is a will and there is a why.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such strong words there. And about those boundaries, that's a question that's coming up soon. But I wanted to tap into a particular question that actually got answered or asked a couple times. One from David in our audience, and then a second time by Florence, which is, how do you all make sure that you're speaking to and engaging these students who aren't able to walk into that learning center or that resource center to get the support because they're online students? How do they also feel as accepted and included as you guys are making students who are able to walk in as well? And that can be open to anyone who wants to answer that question.
I know in our area, in our actually the whole school, we allow our students to participate in a lot of things virtually. Obviously there are activities on the quad that we just doesn't work. But many times we're having Black History Month event today on campus. And we have a speaker coming in, and it'll be live streamed on our website. So we really encourage them to be more active in a virtual way, but to be more active, through the different events. On many of our sporting events, we are either on like ESPNU or we stream them on our network. So again, it's just trying to show them that there's still ways they can be Wildcats, even if they're not boots on the ground.
I would definitely chime in and also say, because we are a largely commuter campus, and we don't even have, well, we have residential housing, but it's for a very small number of students, and that typically is reserved for our student athletes and students who are on campus very, very late at night for various responsibilities. So we do also engage in a lot of virtual programming and on-campus programming as well. But we just make sure that we send the information over to the students. We email them. We send them the links to live stream. We invite them to come to campus. So even though they may be participating in courses online, they still may be able to access the campus space. But one strategy that we also do, and I would encourage others to do as well for your students who are online and still want to engage in that way, is to survey your students, right? Ask the students how they want to be engaged, because I think a lot of times we as faculty, staff, administrators, and things of that nature, we assume that students want to be engaged in a certain way, and then we get wrapped up in trying to make that way happen. And then we are upset with the results because we're not yielding the number that we were anticipating through all of these phenomenal efforts that we have put in place. But again, I think it goes back to thinking with inside of the box and being the data driven institution to simply ask the question to say, hey, my online students or my commuter students, how do you want to be engaged? Do you still want to be invited to campus, or do you prefer to have a virtual option where you can log in? We know over the past couple of years, many of our students are Zoom fatigued, right? They don't want to necessarily log into a live stream, or they don't necessarily want to be engaged in a virtual setting, and so they're just looking for more explicit information on how they can access the campus space. And so maybe it's just a simple shift in how marketing and communications is sending out information to the student body to access the information. So just a couple of other things to think about and consider.
Really helpful there. And I'll stick with you a little bit, Daryl, because there was a follow-up question specific to, you've talked a lot about, becoming, data centric and making decisions based off of some of those data points. And one question that came in from David was, are there any specific programs, software, or other systems utilized to ascertain the probable at-risk populations?
So that's a great question. So we specifically use EAB Navigate as our system. We also utilize that for our early alerts. We utilize that, and they have their metrics and things of that nature of being able to identify students that are at risk, etc. We specifically have an individual hired, our assistant director of student success technology, who works to pull specific data for the student success, student development and success division. So
Mm,
anything that we need from her would say, hey, Bridget, can you go in and pull information on this population or this student, or be able to look at the trends over the past couple of years? Um, and so for us, that has been very helpful because she has been able to pull the different trends. I mean, we can even drill down to see what specific high schools, what are the GPAs coming in, what specific high schools, and then be able to create a caseload to support that particular population of students.
mm,
So that's kind of how we approach that work. And even with the early alert system to track. So once students are in the system and we have our early alerts, our academic coaches only work with the early alerts that come to them from their specific caseload. And we actually work with Bridget in the technology era to only have certain alerts generate cases, because everybody who works with early alerts know you can get an alert for every single thing. If somebody sneezed 3 times in class, you can get an alert for it. Okay. So we wanted to be intentional and not overwhelm our academic coaches and say what specific things are going to be most effective for our academic coaches to know that will impact persistence and retention. And so
mm,
originally we had an alert for missing classes, right? And we had one for missing assignments. We took the one away from missing classes because one, the university already does attendance verification for financial aid purposes. So we were just
mm,
duplicating that effort. But then number two, if a student has a lot of missing assignments, there's probably a correlation to them missing class as well. So we were able to take away that extra um, early alert requests that we're sending out to faculty, which is increasing faculty participation, which is
mhm.
giving us stronger data to be able to support students and do our interventions as needed. So, just again, thinking inside the box, we already have all these things in place, but how can we
Mhm.
strategize to be more streamlined and more intentional with the execution?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a good point that you're making there, because if the floodgates are moving too rapidly, then it's going to be just as bad as if there is no data coming in at all. And so we definitely have to make sure that we're finding that balance. So absolutely great response there. Um, I I wanted to go back to a thread that we were talking about a little bit earlier around how do we make sure we're supporting these students, but also keeping, as Julia mentioned in her question, healthy and professional boundaries while doing so. Um, I know, Dr. Shrell, you were saying that that's something that you're continuing to work on. But I'd love for anyone on the panel to just mention what are some of the things that you guys have been doing to support yourselves as you're supporting the students? And it could be you're still trying to figure that out.
We're all working on that, it looks like. But well, I'm a little new to Texas Southern University, so I've only been there about a year and a half. Prior to that, had some higher ed experience, but also mostly K through 12, and so I'm used to always having something to do. And so when I got to a higher ed, I was like, oh, I got too much free time. But I think that one thing that our university has been doing, which has definitely helped, is they have put it on all the staff calendar, like a meditation section or session. And so it kind of just pops up on your calendar. And so it was nice to have, to kind of sit there for a second and take the time to breathe and, regroup and reconnect. Because with our students, with our campus, there's always something going on, right? And you can, find yourself looking at your phone, the emails being, everything is going off at the same time. So for me, I think what's really been helping with my balance is just, giving all that I can while I'm there. And then just being self-disciplined and putting my own self on my calendar, when it's time for me to just step away and allow myself to do whatever it is, whether it's watch first 48 hours or, take a nap or whatever it is I need to do. But I do think it's important that, as was mentioned earlier, it's stepping away sometimes from it, because it does allow your mind to rest, but then it opens up other ideas. So sometimes that's the downfall of me sitting still, is then I start thinking even more things that I want to do. But it does help to give you that clarity. And it definitely helps with your team as well, because you don't ever want them to feel the pressure of, like Dr. was saying earlier, Hefty was saying, that we have so many alerts that go out. We also use EAB. And so you do have this constant stuff going on. And you don't want your staff to feel the burning out. So I think what helps is celebrating the wins as you go along also helps, because it's like, okay, let's take a break. Let's do some celebrating. And then, we can regroup tomorrow, or we can regroup later. So I think those are important. That really helps to find that balance, to allow people to kind of step away for a second.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would add to that to say, on the flip side, my philosophy on student success is that it's built on trust, it's maintained or sustained through meaningful relationships, and it's effective through engagement, right?
Yeah.
So in order for us to really engage, a lot of times we jump to the engagement piece, right? How do we engage students? Um, but you can't engage them unless you have a relationship with them. You can't build a relationship with them unless you have their trust.
Yeah.
And so for me, how I'm able to still find my healthy and professional boundary is building the trust with the student, having the relationship with them, and engaging them. Then I can delegate, right?
Yeah.
Because once you have the student looped in, once they are bought into your ideals, once they're bought into your leadership and things of that nature, they will do anything for you. And so then you can start delegating some other tasks as you're developing their leadership. It's also allowing you to take some time for yourself and not to be overwhelmed and inundated with trying to support and save the institution, if you
Mhm.
will. Um, and that may mean for me as well, to keep them quiet, to give them a space, I have to have snacks in my office, right? So I have all the good snacks, and that's just a way just to give a quick check-in. They're not going to stay for long. They just want their snack before they go to class, but I can do a quick check-in. Hey, how you doing? And then they're allowed to go on, and I still have time to really handle my business, and
Yeah.
do what it is that I need to do. But being able to have their trust and develop that relationship with them. Once you have those two pieces, you can engage them in any type of way. And a lot of times they will go to bat for you and say, no, Dr. Hilton doesn't have time right now, or
Mhm.
he'll come back because this is my time. And in our time, we just come and we sit in silence, right? Like they will be your biggest advocates as you are
Yeah,
finding your boundaries for yourself.
that's true. That's
Yeah.
absolutely true.
Mhm.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure, I know we're getting close to time. There was a question for Ms. Wilkinson that came in from Renee, specifically about earlier you talked about ways in which you were navigating,
Mhm.
being able to serve students within, just like the changing landscapes within the state of Florida.
Mhm.
And Renee asked, what are some of the examples of maybe some of the verbiage that you use when you're trying to approach and support students? Are there some examples that you could give there?
So right now we use a lot of academic support services, admission support services, very general. The institution as a whole is currently creating a statement that addresses all of those things and how we're going to serve those students in a unified manner. So right now, very general, if it's just very general, but we're headed very, in the very near future to something more concrete. And that we can put on our website, and this is how we engage students of varying populations.
Gotcha. Gotcha. It's good to hear that that's something that you're thinking about from the university perspective, so that it doesn't feel like it's a patchwork going on there.
Yeah.
And I think other people as well, but would certainly love to see how that what that like more concrete statement ends up looking
Yeah.
like, and and figuring out ways in which we can make sure that more institutions can have that support as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there were a ton of great questions coming in. And unfortunately I wasn't able to get to all of them, but this was definitely a really, really good conversation. I'm glad to just hear some of the different ways in which our panelists are supporting students, continuing to think about them both on campus and off campus, utilizing data to get more support for the services that they're currently using, as well as those advocacy for future services as well. And I think this is, a conversation that we ideally continue to have as we move forward. But for now, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Sherrill, to Dr. Hilton, to Ms. Wilkinson, to Ms. Washington for your time here. Really, really great conversation. And I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation. And I'll kick it on over to Elena for just some last thoughts here, and then we'll go ahead and close out.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And thank you, Melvin, for leading the discussion today. Before we end today's webinar, I did want to invite everyone here to attend our next free webinar, which actually takes place next week on February 28th at 12 p.m. Eastern. We are going to be taking a deeper dive into Upswing's products. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what we can do in terms of supporting your students, you can actually register for that in the chat. Simone is going to put the link there for us. But again, we want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. And just as a reminder, we'll send you the recording as well as the PD certificate in the next couple of days. If you have any questions about today's topic or you would like to learn more about Upswing, please reach out to us at speak@upswing.io. Until next time, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.